Today, we're going to be talking about Turborepo. So, Turborepo is a really awesome build tool by Vercel. It is a monorepo tool that lets you take advantage of caching in order to increase your performance in your repos. It's a bit of an advanced concept to explain, but essentially imagine that you have a regular npm node project that has no build tools associated with it. In your package.json, all you have are just a few a few scripts that are running in your package.json. Every time you run those scripts, likely there's going to be no caching. They sort of just run fresh every single time. Let's imagine we have a build step, right, that builds out a Next.js website. And say we didn't change anything on our website from the previous commit to the next commit. Say, for example, we have a CMS, a headless CMS, and someone commits a change to that CMS, which then causes the Next.js site to rebuild. Nothing really changed in terms of code. However, when we deploy the site to Vercel or Netlify or any other service, what's going to happen is we will rebuild the exact same site pretty much 2 times in a row. And what Turbo does for us is it kind of negates that step, because what Turbo does is use caching in order to increase the performance of your npm tasks. So again, it's a little bit of a hard concept to explain. Turbo is using hashing in order to do this. It kind of reads your whole repository and turns it into a hash, and then it kind of compares that hash to another one if your repository has changed in the future. And that's how it does its internal caching. But to sum it up, basically, what Turbo is doing for us and why it's a really cool tool to use in your projects is because it just increases the performance of almost every single task. Now, the other part of Turborepo that's important to note is that it is a monorepo tool. If you're not familiar with how monorepos work, essentially imagine you have multiple different sub projects or services for your project. A good example of this would be, say you have a Next.js front end website and you have some sort of headless CMS like Sanity that powers the content for that site. Traditionally, we would have those two in two different Git repositories. They have two different version histories. They're completely separate in terms of version control. With a monorepo, though, like Turbo, what happens is you sort of combine the two projects into one repository. So within one repo, within one folder, or one project, you can manage both your front end with Next.js and your back end with Sanity. And you could scale this indefinitely. For example, Twitter, at least as far as I know, Twitter's entire code base is all stored in one monorepo. Now, there is a drawback to doing something like that. I believe Twitter's code base takes about 30 minutes to install just because of how many files and how many different packages that massive code base has. But if you're working on a small project and you just want to co-locate your dependencies, you just want to have faster build times, faster performance, Turbo is a great solution. And yeah, let's go ahead and just jump into it, and I'll show you how to set up a Turbo repo with a Next.js front end and a Sanity back end as just a quick example. Okay, so I'm currently on the Turbo repo website. Turbo has got amazing docs. So if at any point in the video you just kind of get confused or you just want to learn more about certain tasks or certain ways that Turbo works, definitely check out their website. I'm not going to really explain a lot of how the caching stuff works or how the hashing and all of that stuff on the back end works. I'm mainly here to just show you how to set this up from scratch and get it up and running. Okay, so let's go ahead and actually boot up a terminal. I'm going to go ahead and minimize the window here. Let's get a terminal up and running. If I can spell that right. Terminal. Oh, Jesus. Terminal. God. Clear this out. Let's go ahead and do npm init turbo at latest. And this is going to run the turbo initializer script. So it's going to ask us where do we want to create the turbo repo. I just realized I am not in my desktop, so really quickly cd into the desktop. Run that command again. So I'm going to just call this my turbo repo, which is the default name. And then we're going to choose npm as our package manager. And what this does is it'll generate a list or a sort of predefined repository for us. So you can see that we have an apps.web being generated, apps slash docs, packages UI, all of this sort of good stuff being generated here. Cool. So after the build is done, it'll ask you if you want to log into your Turbo account. Basically, this is where something called remote caching comes into play. And this is where, if you're using Vercel, you can actually share your cache with your team. So if you run a task on your computer and like say a build task, right? Remote cache will be able to cache the output of that build task and share it with people on your team, or just keep it online so that you can, sort of call back to it whenever you need to do it. I'm not going to be using remote caching in this video, so and it's not really something that you need per se, especially if you're just a sole developer. All right, let's go and cd into that turbo repo, and then we'll open that in VS Code. So by default, Turborepo is going to generate two directories for us where our code base is going to live, and that's going to be apps and packages. Now, in monorepos, there is a convention where your main projects live under a folder called apps. And in this folder is we have two Next.js websites. One is a web for like your front end, and then one is the docs for like whatever documentation website you need. But essentially the convention is if your main project, so docs and web, if they share any dependencies that are not third party from npm, then you want to put those dependencies, like your own custom code dependencies is what I'm talking about, into another folder called packages. And so in here, packages just generated a few folders for us in here. For example, like UI is has some components that are common to both web and docs. tsconfig just defines some TypeScript configs that are shared between the two projects. And again, ESLint is the same as well. So these are not third-party npm dependencies. These are things that we have built ourselves, or in this case was generated by Turborepo itself, and it's being shared across docs and web. Now, I'm going to just go ahead and torch both of these directories because we actually don't really need them. We will revisit the apps directory, but for now, let's just start with a completely blank Turborepo. So you might notice that this doesn't look a lot different from a regular npm repository. And the reason for that is because it really isn't. Turborepo is sort of just a wrapper around your basic npm and node project. So taking a look at this package.json, you'll notice that it looks very, very similar to like a regular Node.js project with some added turbo goodness in here. So you'll notice that in our dev dependencies, we actually have turbo installed and it's set to the version of latest. And then in our scripts, we actually have a few tasks that will run turbo commands. So for example, our build command in here will run turbo run build, dev, same thing, etc., etc. So what exactly is Turbo doing for us? So in turbo.json, this is where we actually define the configuration for how Turbo runs its tasks and how it does its caching. You'll notice that we have a pipeline key here, and in this pipeline, we have our tasks from package.json. In this key, this is how we define and sort of configure Turbo to do its caching and to do its different like optimizations and things like that. So we're not going to get too much into detail right now, but we will revisit this in a little bit. For now, let's go ahead and actually create our first app. So our first app is going to be just a regular Next.js website. So to do that, let's create a new folder and we'll just call it apps. Now within apps, we're going to open up a terminal actually, and then we're going to cd into apps. In here, what we're going to call is just the initializer script for Next.js. Okay, so in the terminal, we're going to just create a new Next.js project. So to do that, we're going to run npm init next at latest app, and then we're going to call it front end. Just get that installed. Cool, it's going to ask us for a version. I'm going to just choose a stable version, so 13.3. And then that's going to run the package install script, and then we'll get Next.js within our apps directory. Okay, so Next.js has installed in our apps folder. For some reason, it generated a yarn.lock file, so I'm going to go ahead and just delete that. We don't want to use yarn in this repository. We just want to keep it strictly npm. So With Next installed, let's take a look at how our package.json is sort of formatted. So within this package.json, it's exactly what you would expect. It's just a regular package.json with the dependencies, with a name, with a version, and all of that. The thing with Turborepo and how I like to use Turborepo is I basically use it via npm workspaces. The way that workspaces work in npm is you have a global like root package.json file, and this package.json actually doesn't define any dependencies except for global ones, like for example turbo, that runs throughout the entire project. All of your dependencies for each of your apps should actually live in the same folder that your app is in. So, for example, our Next.js website is under slash front end, and it defines its own package.json that has all of the Next.js and React dependencies in there. The only issue with this though is when we generated that Next.js app, it actually installed a node modules folder within front end itself. And that's actually something that we don't want. So another benefit of npm workspaces is that you can actually so first of all, let's just get rid of this real quick. And then, so the thing with npm workspaces is while you can define your packages with your projects, if you run npm install at the root of the entire project, so at so if I cd out here, so at my turbo repo, which is the root of the project, if I run npm install, it actually will install every single dependency in every single project, and it'll hoist all of the node modules right into the global or the root node modules folder up here. So rather than having like a ton of node modules just like everywhere in your project, kind of like taking up space, what npm workspaces does for us is it'll just take all of the individual project dependencies and put them into a root node modules folder. So that's really, really helpful for us. So to enable workspaces, we need to, oh, perfect. Actually, Turborepo already did it for us. So we have a workspaces key in our package.json, and in this key, it just takes an array of directories that sort of point to where npm projects are. So in this case, we have app star, which just means look into the apps folder, pull out any projects that have a package.json. We don't need the packages star because we got rid of that one, but if you want to include that, you can keep that in your project. Cool. One other thing that we need to change though is in the package.json up here. Just by convention, I like to convert this to 0.0.0. If you are not going to make an npm dependency, or if you're not going to commit to npm, don't include a version number. That's just sort of a convention that I have when I'm working on projects. That just kind of keeps it so that like I can't really explain why I do it, but it's like it just makes me feel good that it's 0.0.0. Another thing too is to keep the name of the package the same as the folder. So in this case, front end here, front end up here. The reason for that is Turbo uses the name of this package.json to it like shows it in the terminal when it's running commands. And also you need this package name here to be the same, because if you want to install dependencies into this project, you need to refer to this this repository, this project, via its name up here. Okay, so really quickly, just to interject, sorry, but we need to install our node modules again. So let's go ahead and do npm I. And like I was saying, so within an npm workspace, everything sort of lives at that root node modules. After you initialize a new project within your apps directory, just make sure to delete its node modules and then go back out to the root, or the root of the project, and then run npm install to get your fresh node modules in there. One other thing that I wanted to make real quick, or just point out real quick, is that if you want to install packages into your different workspaces, so for example, if you want to install a package into app/front end, the way that you do that is through a you use npm install like you would, but you need to add an extra like flag to it to do that. So for example, let's say I want to install my logger library that I made, Lucene, into front end. To do that, we just call npm install and the name of the package. So in this case, Lucene -w front end. So what -w means is, it's a flag for workspace, and then front end is the name of the workspace. And again, it's the name of the workspace and the name in that package.json. So you hit enter here and it'll install Lucene for you into this package.json, but it actually installs the package into that root node modules. So now if we go ahead and run, say, our dev command, so npm run dev, you could see that we immediately, so npm run dev in this case is it's like a namespace for Turbo run dev, right? And now Turbo is taking over our dev server and it's running for us. It's running the Next.js dev server for us. And you could see that in our output, it actually put the name of the package front end and then the task that's currently running dev. And now we can go ahead and access the dev server like normal. Let me go ahead and put this in a new space just so we don't have so many tabs open. Cool. So we have Next.js running in the in its dev server. So yeah, that's really, really cool. And it's doing that via Turbo. All right, let's go ahead and spin down the dev server and we'll clear that out. Let's go ahead and install Sanity as our CMS. So to do that, we're going to create a new folder called CMS. And then we're going to go ahead and cd into apps/CMS. And then we're going to call npm init sanity at latest. And that's going to run the sanity initializer script for us. I'm just going to create a new project, and then we'll just call this my sanity project. And then we'll let that run through. We'll hit yes. It'll create a data set for us. I'm going to have to delete this after the video is over. But save that there. We'll just do a clean project with no dependencies or no schemas. Sure, we'll use TypeScript. And again, this is going to install Sanity into that apps/CMS folder for us. So we have to remember to get rid of its node modules, go back out to the top or the root of the project, and then npm install from there. All right, with that done, let's go ahead and cd, or we're already in CMS. Let's go ahead and just remove that node modules folder using rm/rf. Now that that's gone, we're going to go back to the root of the project and then run npm install. Okay, with that all out of the way, we now have a Turborepo that has two different projects in it, a front end ran by Next.js and a back end or a CMS that's powered by Sanity. Now, if we run the dev command again, npm run dev, you'll notice that it runs both the front end for Next.js and the CMS at the same time. And this is one of the cool ways that Turbo kind of works. It kind of does everything in parallel. So in this case, one npm command can run two different things at one time. So now if we go to localhost 3000, we'll see that we have our Next.js server. And then if I head over to localhost 333, we also have a Sanity backend running at the same time. So that's a really cool way to sort of get like concurrency kind of going with tasks with Turbo. So let's go ahead and spin that down really quickly. Now we're essentially done. We now have a Turborepo project that actually uses caching and has everything sort of set up for us by default. I do want to get really quickly into how these tasks kind of like work and what you need to do if you want to add a custom task. So essentially what happens is at the package.json level, we define all of the tasks that our project sort of does, right? We have a build step, we have a dev step, and we have a lint step, as well as a format step, but that doesn't use Turbo. The sort of expectation with these scripts is that these steps should correlate to every single project that you have in your Turborepo. So what that means is if there's a build, dev, and lint step here, I should expect to see the exact same three steps defined within our front end package.json. So we have a build, or we have a build down here, sorry, and a dev. We don't have a lint command yet, so we're going to have to add that at a future time. And again, in our CMS, we should also see the exact same commands as well. So we have a dev, we have a build, we don't have a lint step. So the idea is when you have these at the top level, you call basically turbo run build, turbo run dev, and turbo run lint. And what these turbo commands point to is the turbo.json file. So in this case, we have npm run build is going to actually call turbo run build. Turbo run build is going to look into turbo.json, find the build in the pipeline key, and then it's going to configure itself based on these two properties. So for example, depend on is just saying like, depend on this task right here. So it's kind of referencing itself. And then outputs is sort of like what it looks at for caching purposes. So in this case, our outputs, our build is looking for an output of dist star star or .next or whatever. We probably want to also add, I believe sanity is actually dist as well, so we don't actually need to add anything for sanity. But if you had another output directory for a build step, you want to add that to your outputs key over here. And again, lint is doing the same thing. Dev as well. So turbo run dev is going to look into this key right here. It's going to say, okay, we don't actually want any caching for the dev step, which makes sense because we're in dev. We don't need to have caching enabled. And so after Turbo looks into this file and looks at this key, it's then going to look into each of your projects package.json. So in this case, let's go to our front end or our NextJS package.json. It's then going to go into here. So dev build, and then it'll call that command or sort of like wrap around that command, if that makes sense. So I guess this kind of sums this up, right? npm run build will call turbo run build, which will then call next build kind of in a wrapped around way, so that you can use caching and all of that sort of good stuff. And just to show you how that caching works, let's actually go ahead and run the build command. So we'll do npm run build. Now on the first run, we don't have any cache. We've actually never built the project up before. So it's going to run through a full build step and actually build out everything as if we were doing it without Turborepo. Now that the build has ran, we can see that the tasks are successful and that we've cached 2 total items within 11.29 seconds. Now, we actually haven't changed anything between our projects. So if we run the build step again, what we should see happen is just an immediate return for our builds. And that's exactly what happened here. So you'll notice that I ran the build step somewhere up there. And what happened was it took only 351 milliseconds and we got a little nice full turbo message here. So what happened was we built the site and the CMS already, and we didn't change the contents of those 2 websites. So when we went to build it again, it just said, oh, I already have this in cache. I have this exact same build already done. Let me refer to that and then pull that up. And so that's exactly what happened. That's why it took 351 milliseconds. It was just kind of thinking about where is the cache in that time. So this is really, really powerful when you're working on websites that take a long, long time to build. I'm not entirely sure yet if Turbo does incremental caching or if it's able to cache like parts of your project and rebuild other parts of it. That's a little bit of a black box for me. So if you guys know anything about that, or if anyone from Vercel is watching, if you guys want to just drop a comment on that, I would definitely appreciate that. But yeah, this is essentially Turborepo at a very high level. You can now run tasks and have caching. You can add projects and workspaces to your Turborepo, and yeah, just take full advantage of all of the caching and all of the benefits of a monorepo. So hopefully that this video was insightful for you. I know that I went a little bit high level on this one. I wish I could go more deeper into it, but I just didn't want this to be like an hour or 2 hour long video. So again, if you want to check out the Turborepo docs, definitely do that. There's a lot of great information in there. Hopefully from this video though, you just have a base to get started, and you can go ahead and take the next steps from there and get more advanced with this. So with that said, thank you for watching. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe for the channel. And yeah, let me know what other content you guys want to see in terms of web development and creative web development. All right, take care.